Yo, what's up, guys? It's Caleb. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be starting our series on off-season reviews and outlooks into the season. We're going to start off with the Atlantic Division, and our first team will be the 76ers. So this is a team whose off-season I loved. Daryl Morey came in and addressed so many needs that they had. So they added Seth Curry, Dwight Howard, Danny Green, and Terrence Ferguson. So the most important one for me is Seth Curry because they needed shooting desperately. Like last year, there was no spacing. Embiid couldn't work down low on the block. Simmons couldn't run the offense without having five guys in his face. But yeah, I think Seth Curry will be a huge addition here. They're going to try to put him in that JJ Redick role. So I think he can do a pretty good job of that, playing that two-man game with Embiid. The playmaking should be better than Redick's. I'm not sure how his off the ball, like running off a screen shooting will match up. I think that'll be a little bit less than what JJ did, but regardless, he should be a huge help to this team. I'm looking for him to have a big year. Dwight Howard gives them some backup center depth that they needed since they got rid of Al Horford. Granted, Horford was starting for points of the season, but you couldn't really play him next to Embiid, and your next best center would be Kyle O'Quinn, and I don't think you really want him getting minutes, so Dwight should help this team a lot in a backup role. Danny Green should also help this team out with his shooting. I know all the jokes about him breaking threes throughout all the playoffs, but in generally speaking, he's a good shooter, and another veteran presence as well who's been to the championship, knows what it takes to win, so that should help these young guys like Embiid and Simmons out. Ferguson, I'm not sure if he's actually going to get minutes or not, but it's at least a decent young piece to look forward to, see if maybe he can do some things out there for you. But yeah, losing Horford and only giving up a first-round pick to get rid of him honestly isn't that bad with how bad his contract is. I kind of expected them to have to give up 2 picks to get rid of him, but hey, you only got rid of 1, and you got Danny Green in return, which should help your team out, so that's good. Losing Alec Burks and Raul Neto isn't really going to hurt them too much. Other than bench scoring, I guess Burks could have been decent to keep for that, but that's one of the main questions for me is their bench depth and scoring. But I think the starting unit could be good enough to where that wouldn't be a problem, although we'll have to see how that plays out. Another question is, how are Embiid and Simmons going to play together this year? There's always been the question of, can you win with these two together? I mean, the year they got knocked out by the Raptors, it seemed like they were good together, but we'll have to see how they fit around this roster together. I'm not really sure. I think this could be a good year for Philly, though. They bring in Doc Rivers, who I'm not as high on as most people are. Well, I guess that's kind of died down a little bit since blowing another 3-1 lead, but regardless, it's an upgrade over Brett Brown, who I think is probably was one of the worst coaches last year between him and Nate McMillan for the Pacers. But regardless, it's an improvement. We'll have to see how he deals with this roster. I don't know what kind of X's and O's and stuff he'll have them run and stuff, but I feel like Curry will be really good for him as well. He's pretty good at using shooters. But I think their ceiling would be like a 3rd seed. You know, like everything clicks. Curry has a great year where he's averaging like 15 plus points. Danny Green's back to how he was as a shooter. Simmons and Embiid are working together. Embiid can post up as much as he wants to. Stuff like that. The bench unit is much of a problem because they can stagger guys. That's kind of the highest I can see this team getting. Their floor, I could see them falling down to that top play-in game at the 7th seed. Just kind of the spacing still doesn't work. Embiid and Simmons can't stay healthy, things like that. I think it's going to be somewhere in the middle. I'd say they're going to either get like a 5th or 6th seed and be solidified in that playoff race. I think my guess is this team probably makes it to the 2nd round and loses there, depending on who they're matched up with in the 1st round, because that 1st round series is going to be tough for the third through sixth seed, like regardless of who's there. But I think they had a really good offseason. I'd give them an A-. Next up, we have the Boston Celtics. So the Celtics had an offseason where it's kind of forgettable. They lost Hayward, which sucks. He was really good for them last year, and then obviously he couldn't play in the playoffs for injury. But you get the trade exception back for him instead of getting Doug McDermott and Miles Turner, which I think could have helped this team out a lot if they had accepted that deal. Turner gives you the rim protection you need. They've lacked at that position for a long time now. And he also helps you space the floor, which in that series against the Heat last year, they really took advantage of Tice not being hesitant to shoot the three. So I thought that could have helped this team out a lot. And then you get Doug McDermott, who's a good spot-up shooter, run-off screen, stuff like that. And then he gives you versatility because you can play him at like 3 or the 4. I thought that would have been a really good pickup for them, but they opt to go with the trade exception from Charlotte, so we'll just have to see what they can do with that move. Out of all the guys who are around that $28 million that the exception is for, that could be a good fit for them. I could see like a Buddy Hield being a good fit for them, but other than that, I didn't really like any of the other guys there. There's guys like Harrison Barnes, stuff like that. I would have rather them traded him to the Pacers, but this is what they're going to have to deal with. They also lose Wanamaker and Cantor, but they kind of replace those two with Teague and Thompson. So I think Teague will be a better fit for this team than Wanamaker. You're losing a little bit of defense, but you get more playmaking and shot creation, which I think this team desperately needed, especially off their bench. So when Kemba comes back, or if they decide to start Smart while Kemba's injured, then I think Teague can help out that bench unit a lot. And I think Thompson can also help a lot too, because he's going to still bring you the offensive rebounding that Cantor gave you, but he'll give you more defense. He's a little more mobile, a little more athletic, so I think he'll fit this team better than Cantor did, although it's going to clog up that big rotation more, so Stevens is still going to have to figure out how to juggle 3 bigs that are around the same talent level, just different skill sets with Williams, Tice, and Thompson. But overall, I don't think it was too bad of an offseason. They drafted Nesmith, which I think he'll be a good fit. We'll have to see how he plays, but they needed a spot-up shooter for a long time and someone who shoots the ball as efficiently as he did in college. Hopefully, it'll transition well, and he's supposed to be a pretty good defender too. I don't know too much about all the college prospects, so I'll have to get my opinions on them watching them through preseason and through the regular season. They're also really high on Peyton Pritchard, who they selected. He'll probably get some time at backup point with the injury to Walker, so we'll see how that works out. But this team, I could see them being like a 2nd seed, competing for a championship spot. If Brown and Tatum do as good as we hope they can and progress even further than what they have so far, and then they have to hope Kemba comes back healthy and isn't as bad as he was in the playoffs last year. But the questions for them are going to be either rim protection still. I mean, Tice is okay, but that's kind of all you have there. Thompson's not really going to protect the rim for you. He's not a terrible defender, but Robert Williams can be a good rim protector, but sometimes his team defense isn't always the greatest. Then you're also worried about your playmaking, so they gotta hope that Tatum can take a jump there, because your other guards there aren't amazing at it. Smart and Walker and Teague are okay, but nothing too crazy. And therefore, I could see them falling to the 6th seed. I don't think it will happen, but I think that's as low as this team could drop. It's if they get off to a slow start with Kemba being gone, and they can't really figure out the big rotation well, and Tatum and Brown don't take much of a jump. But I think they'll be probably around the 2nd or 3rd seed. I think Tatum's playmaking in the playoffs last year was for real. I think Brown will take a small boost in scoring, but not too much. Maybe he'll go from like 20 to like 22 or something like that. But I think those two guys will take small jumps, both of them, and then I think Teague and Thompson will fit in pretty well and give this team some veteran presence that they needed. And I could see them either falling just short in the conference finals again, or I could even see them getting to the championship. But C+ off season, nothing too crazy, but they didn't lose a ton, I guess. They replaced it decently. Could have done way better, though. Next up, we have the Knicks. Now, the Knicks are a team who really didn't do too much this offseason other than their draft, which I think for this team is a good thing, considering how they've overpaid players in the past and just really ruined their roster flexibility with guys who don't really add much for them. So this year, not making any signings like that is a huge win for the Knicks. They brought in guys like Austin Rivers, Alec Burks, and Nerlens Noel, who I think on really cheap deals can be pretty beneficial for this team. Not only will they fit better around their young pieces than what they originally had, maybe perhaps one of them has a really good year and that turns into a trade asset for another team, and then they can get some young pieces back for them. So that's a good thing. They also drafted Obi Toppin and Emmanuel Quickley. I think Obi is going to be really good for them. He seems like he's ready. I think he could be kind of like a young Blake Griffin type of player eventually. I don't know if he's probably not quite there yet, but I think he has a lot of potential and he's ready to play now as well. So that's a good pick. Quickly, I think he can be good for this team given that he's a shooter. I don't really know much else about him, but watching the few minutes he got in the preseason game the other night, it looks like he's confident in attacking closeouts, so that's good as well. So I think if he gets minutes, that could be good for them as well. They didn't really lose too much, just role players and end of rotation guys, so that's good. A problem for them is going to be their spacing. You know, you got Elfrid Payton, Mitchell Robinson, and Julius Randle out there. You're kind of dry on shooters. I mean, and then you got Barrett too, which I think he can become a good shooter, but I think he needs others around him for that to really show itself. So they're going to struggle with that again. I'm guessing their offense is going to be very good. Another thing they need to worry about is their core. Like, is anyone on this roster other than the main young guys going to stick around? And specifically, I'm talking about Dennis Smith Jr., Kevin Knox, and Frank Ntilikina. Like, are they going to actually play well? Are they going to provide any sort of good impact on this team? Because especially for Frank and Dennis, like, I feel like this is probably their last year to prove whether they belong in this lineup or not. So that's something that they need to figure out this year as well. And last thing for them is they brought in Thibodeau. I'm not sure how I like the fit because I don't know how these young players are going to mesh with him. He likes to play players really hard, lots of minutes, and I feel like he might play a lot of veterans over the young guys, which isn't what this Knicks team needs to be looking for. So I'm worried about that fit. But this team is going to be a bottom team. You know, they could be anywhere from the worst record in the conference to like the second or third worst. My guess is they'll be like the 13th or 14th best team because I think the Pistons will probably be the worst. But okay, offseason from the Knicks, small step in the right direction, so that's a good thing. And then we have the Brooklyn Nets. This is a team I'm very high on, but this is a team that can be a controversial opinion because a lot of people think a lot of different things. Now, they didn't add too much, but they brought back Joe Harris, which is really good. They might have overpaid a little bit, but with this team, you're going to want to bring back those kind of guys regardless of the cost. They also added Jeff Green and Landry Shamet, who I think will probably get some minutes. I'm not sure how big of a role they have, but I think Landry Shamet can be really good for them as a shooter and a defender. Just add more guard depth for this team, especially when you got one of your main guys in Kyrie not being very good at defense. And Jeff Green, I think the main thing for me is he makes Taurean Prince expendable, which could be good for them if they can find a trade to bring in someone, upgrade a position while giving up Prince. I think that would be pretty good for them. Also, Green will bring in some leadership and some championship experience. Bruce Brown is another defensive-minded guard, so that's always good to have around Kyrie. I'm not sure if he's going to play very much or not, but it's always good to have the option just in case. They didn't lose very much, just end of rotation guys again. But the main thing for them is going to be how are KD and Kyrie going to play? How healthy are they going to be? Based on the preseason, it looks like they're healthy and it looks like they're damn good. So I'm pretty high on them. I feel like they're both going to play great together. And I feel like this team's ceiling is really high. I could see them being like the second seed and even competing for a championship. But it all depends on those guys' health, because if one of them goes down or if they're not healthy, they can get a lower seed, or they could be injured in the playoffs, and then you're not going to probably make it very far with that. Another thing for them is how good of a coach is Steve Nash going to be. You would assume from how he plays the game that he'd be a great coach, but I mean, it's his first year. First-year coaches don't always do great, and we saw like Jason Kidd. You'd think he'd be a good coach too, but he was not very good for the Bucks at all. But I think Nash will do good for them. He seems like a humble guy, so I feel like he'll be able to admit when he's wrong and make adjustments and stuff like that, the important things in the playoffs. So if all the injuries and stuff were to happen, I see them falling to like a 6 seed, still being in the little mix of pretty good Eastern Conference teams. So I think, for me, I think this team is going to be like a 3 seed, maybe even somewhere between 2 and 4. My guess would be like a 3 seed. I think they won't reach their ceiling because they won't be playing a ton in the regular season. I feel like Kyrie and KD are probably going to rest here and there. They're not going to want to rush those guys back fast or be too hasty with their minutes, so they might get off to a little bit of a slow start, but then they'll catch on and they'll be really good in the playoffs because of their experience at those levels. So pretty good offseason for them. They didn't do too much, but they added little pieces that could help, which is good for a team that already has 2 superstars. Lastly, we have the Toronto Raptors. Toronto, they had kind of a tough offseason losing Ibaka and Gasol, but they did decent at replacing them. They got Aaron Baines, so that's a good pickup. He can kind of replace Gasol's defensive presence as far as size goes, and he'll give you a little bit of shooting as well. He's not going to replace both of those guys because Ibaka gives you athleticism as well and probably a little bit better of a jump shot, but it's still probably the best they could have done for what was available after losing those guys. So I think they did a good job there. They're going to have to hope Chris Boucher can become a good backup center for them. That way they can get minutes there and hopefully he can help lighten the load of Baines. They also got DeAndre Bembry, which is good wing depth to have. I mean, you already have OG, who's going to be really good for them this year, but it's always good to have backups. I mean, they also have Terrence Davis, who can get some minutes there, but extra guys who have low ego is a good thing because they're not really going to complain about their role if they don't get much of one, so he'll just be good insurance to have, or maybe he'll even outplay a guy for a spot. Alex Len for them is just, again, going to be another like insurance policy guy. If Baines or Boucher gets hurt or they're not playing well for some reason, he can come in and be at least a serviceable big for them. So for the Raptors, the main question I have about them is, what is their ceiling? Like, are they just going to be a in between like the middle and high tier type of team, or are they going to find a way to turn themselves into a contender? And the way for them to do that, they're going to have to hope Siakam does better this year in the playoffs. Last year, they looked like a contender for the regular season, but then when they came into the bubble, Siakam really struggled against the Celtics' game plan for him. So hopefully he's back to his old self and is closer to what he was in the regular season, if not better. I think he'll be around the same as far as regular season goes, and in the playoffs, I think he'll be back to his old self. I think a lot of that was just the bubble and him not coming in prepared, not having touched the basketball for a while. So I think he'll be fine. Another thing is Lowry. He's getting pretty up there in age, so you have to wonder, is he going to be as good as he always is, you know? I think personally he shouldn't have a problem with that. He's been good at aging well, so I think he'll still be a good defensive guard who gives you some points and some assists, runs your offense, gives your team good leadership. I don't really see him taking much of a step back. So this team is another one of those teams where they could be like anywhere between the 3rd and the 6th seed. My guess is they get like the 4th seed. They have a pretty good season, but like there's just a lot of tough competition in the East, so they don't get a very high seed. And then I could see them getting to the second round, possibly even the conference finals. If I had to pick now, I would say they would probably lose a tough series in the second round again, but that's not really a knock on their team. It's just there's so many good teams in this East from the 1st to the 6th. Even you could put the 7th seed in there, to be honest. But yeah, I think the Raptors had an okay offseason. Obviously, they lost more than they brought in, but there wasn't really much they could have done, in my opinion, to make this roster better. So that's all for the Atlantic Division. Tomorrow I'm going to come back with the next division, and we'll talk about them. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or anything, put them down in the comments. Subscribe and like if you like the video and want to see more. But that's kind of it. So hope you guys have a good day, and I'll see you next time. Peace.